Saligia, as read by the author, Adam Perry.
Saligia, Chapter 1, Gula. "He's a worthless pig," stated Walker Bart's nurse. "Why do you say that?" a second nurse asked as they made their way toward the nurse's station. "Because the only reason we continue to treat that guy is he has a shitload of money. We give him transfusions on a constant basis. He's in renal failure. All he's doing is using up valuable blood that could be used to save someone's life who might actually recover." "Well, it's not up to us to decide," said the second nurse. "I know, that's what pisses me off." Walker Bart's nurse grumbled and sat down in a chair behind the nurse's desk. She took a sip of lukewarm coffee and said, "Did you know that 3 weeks ago Mr. Bart asked me to quit my job and become his personal stay-at-home nurse? He was ready to pay me, well, let's just say it was a lot." "And you didn't take him up on it?" the second nurse exclaimed in disbelief. "Shit, I would have dropped this floor like a bad habit. You know he's got the money." "Sure. He's the biggest criminal defense attorney in the state. But think about all the people that walked back onto the streets because of that guy. Murderers, thieves, rapists. He walked them all." Before the second nurse could reply, she continued, "And just because he has the money doesn't make it right. I've got a serious ethical problem with what he's doing and with the situation the hospital has allowed. At some point, you have to let it all go and die with some amount of dignity. To me, he's a fat, selfish prick." "I guess you're right, but wouldn't it be nice to die with dignity under a mountain of cash?" An insistent, high-pitched beeping split their conversation. "Oh, shit!" The first nurse spilled her coffee in her lap. "Get the crash cart to 117, stat!" Darkness enveloped Walker Bart as the ringing in his ears faded to nothing. Walker Bart shuffled into ShopSmart in the middle of a group of 6 other individuals. His obesity forced him to move at a creep, not only because diabetes had robbed him of any feeling in his feet, but also because of the constant chafing pain between his reddened, swollen thighs. He leaned against a wall as a waifish and extraordinarily non-crippled woman cut in front of him and took the last handicapped cart, which forced him to continue his painful hobble. As the doors closed behind him, he leaned against the wall a second time. His chest heaved with exertion, and he cursed under his breath when the electric cart wheeled its driver around the corner and disappeared. "Welcome to ShopSmart," an old man said as Walker passed. He dismissed the greeter with a quick wave. He was not interested in conversation. He was hungry, and powerfully so. Walker looked around the store and found it quite empty. Even the people who had entered before him seemed to have been swallowed whole. Still, the scent of fried food hung in the air. Since most ShopSmarts were laid out on a fundamental grid, he made for the deli he knew would be tucked away in the store's far left corner. He slogged his prodigious weight to the deli and wedged his sweaty bulk into a small plastic chair near the counter. Steam rose from pans of food beneath several heat lamps, but there was no one behind the counter. With a push of air from his lips like a dry fart in the wind, he heaved himself out of the chair. "Hello!" he called into the kitchen. Walker Bart looked from side to side and wondered if the staff was tucked away in the back doing prep work. To his dismay, there was no answer, only the sound of his stomach churning deep inside his enormous gut. The acid gnawed at him, a superheated pool of volcanic reflux brewed behind layer upon layer of fat. The food behind the glass enticed him. Mac and cheese slithered over the sides of its pan, link sausages whose cases popped with boils of grease, mashed potatoes in globby clumps. "Hey, who's running this place?" Bart called out. "No one," answered a deep country voice slathered in lard. "Clothes for inventory." Walker turned around to see a stocky black man sitting in the chair he had just vacated. The man crossed his muscular legs and leaned back. "Just me and my crew, counting all this shit." "What?" Walker leaned his head back. His triple chins retreated into one massive flesh fold. "The store's not closed. I just came in behind a bunch of people and there's a greeter at the door." "It look like anyone else is here, man?" Well, no, but that line of unmanned registers looks like every other time I've ever poked my head in one of these places, gestured Walker with one flabby finger. I know I came in behind a group of people. My crew probably done got him out of here. The man rose from the chair and walked over to the counter to stand next to Walker. He leaned over the glass and commented on the food. Some good shit in there today, man. Yeah, answered Walker. He moved to put a couple of inches between himself and the stranger. Noticing Walker's sudden shift, the man offered a warm smile and extended his hand. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Name's Bub. He squeezed Walker's hand with a grip like having your hand slammed between two slabs of black granite. Walker Bart. He withdrew his hand and shook off the cramp delivered in the shake. Look, Walker. Bub stepped back and looked right, then left. Ain't no one around here, so if you're hungry, just slip back there and make you a plate. It's just gonna go bad if someone don't eat it. See? Bub swatted over Walker's head. There's already flies scoping out the joint. Oh, thank God, Walker exclaimed. I'm starving. He squeezed himself through the swinging doors to get behind the counter. God ain't got nothing to do with it. You can make that check out to Bub. Fucking A. Walker grabbed a plate and began to pile it high. He took a crusty pair of tongs and stabbed them into every steaming receptacle. Brown gravy dripped over into the spaghetti tray. Tomato sauce splattered onto buttered rolls. Whipped topping from several pieces of pie dropped onto the floor in wet dollops. Finally content that there was enough food on his plate to ease the rumblings inside, he worked his way back through the narrow door to the table in front of the counter. I took the liberty of grabbing you some tea, man. Bub placed the styrofoam cup next to Walker's tray. Looked like you could use it. Much obliged. Walker pulled a handkerchief from his pants pocket and dabbed the sweat on his forehead. Very kind of you. No problem. Bub removed an orange inventory gun from his belt loop and punched a series of buttons on the mechanism. I gotta get on this inventory. You make yourself at home, and when you get finished, just call for Bub and I'll let you out. Walker Bart stared at the plate of food on his table. He barely even heard the last thing Bub had said to him. He could never remember having been so hungry. In that moment, he realized there was no silverware. He looked around the other tables only to find them equally as empty. Shit. He pushed himself away from the table and lumbered over to the deli counter. His stomach churned as he searched for any sign of a silverware container, but to no avail. He didn't even see a napkin. However, this problem was beginning to pale in comparison to his need to eat. Walker Bart had felt his blood sugar drop 1,000 times over, but this was nothing like that. This feeling was not so much a drop as it was an out-of-control free fall. He stumbled back to the table and sagged into his chair. With no reservations, he dug his large fingers into the warm Salisbury steak, tore a chunk free, and pushed the dripping wad of meat into his mouth. The taste, initially exquisite, began to rot with every movement of his jaws. Juices sprayed across his tongue tasted like formaldehyde leaking from a cadaver. He spat the meat from his mouth even as his stomach gurgled at the rejection of food. Oh, fuck! Walker wiped his fingers against the edge of the table as he continued to spit chunks from his mouth. The scent of a warm roll rose from his tray and he decided to use it to remove the taste of rotten meat. The first bite turned into a mouthful of hot sand. Stunned, he blew a large plume of granules from his mouth as he fumbled with the glass of tea which Bub had left for him. He took a mighty gulp which was down his throat before Walker could even react to the taste of raw sewage. But for a brief moment, as the awful liquid drained into his stomach, the knotting pain ceased. That is to say, it stopped until he vomited onto his tray and the pain returned with renewed vigor. Walker Bart pushed himself away in horror. He wiped away the last spittle of vomit on the sleeve of his sweat-stained shirt. He opened his mouth to scream for Bub when he doubled over from a terrible pain that ripped through his guts. He heard something to his right and managed to catch a glimpse of the woman who had stolen the last electric cart. She wheeled around a corner into frozen foods, oblivious to Walker's turmoil. "Hey, come back here!" he shouted with one raised fist in the air while the other cradled his rolling guts. "Hey, goddammit!" Walker shouted again as the cart took another corner and disappeared from sight. Now he was pissed. Forgoing the rotten food on his tray, he stumbled after the cart. As he passed through fruits and vegetables, he had a quick look around, but still the store was deserted. He snatched a banana from a display and peeled back its skin, only to have the fruit melt away in his hands to a sticky brown ooze. He flung it away as he choked back another rising surge of vomit in his throat. His steps were slow and laborious. As he turned the corner into the meat department, he saw the cart making another turn at the far end of the store. "Fuck!" he yelled as Bub appeared from the frozen food aisle. "Man, what are you yelling about?" Bub took a step back and grabbed his nose. "Bro, you smell like shit." "No thanks to you." Walker pulled up his sagging pants. "That food back there was fucking rotten." "Well, I guess that's why they left it out there. Looked good to me. Sorry about that, Chief." Walker unbuttoned a couple of buttons on his shirt and fanned his glistening hairy tits. "I've got to find something to eat. My blood sugar is going crazy." "Tell you what I'll do." Bub reached into his pants pocket. "Take this Swiss Army knife and go pop open some soup. Settle your stomach. Then go grab you some Tums or something." "Ugh, you're a lifesaver." Walker took the knife and unfolded the can opener. "The soups are a couple of aisles down and the meds are back across the store." Bub pointed with his inventory gun, then leaned into a freezer and continued to scan products. Wasting no time, Walker Bart made his way out of frozen foods and scanned the signs above the aisles for the word soup. 2 aisles over, he spotted the soup cans and rushed to search for his favorite brand. To his great disappointment, all varieties of soup had been replaced by ShopSmart's own brand, The Value. His stomach burned with every step. He could not afford to be picky. He found a can of chicken noodle soup and snatched it from the shelf. He was in a feverish rush as he worked on the can with a maddeningly frustrating tiny can opener. Twisting the nearly open lid, he broke away the last remaining piece of aluminum attached to the can. He dropped it at his feet as he took in a mouthful of the soup. To his great relief, it did not taste like piss. Walker could barely find time to chew the salty, chunky bits that poured into his mouth before he swallowed them. His stomach, which only seconds earlier had been a boiling cauldron of pain in his abdomen, settled immediately. Walker leaned back against the shelves of food, content to feel his body returning to normal. The spinning in his head was dissipating. He wiped a touch of sweat from his brow and closed his eyes. He was about to take another nourishing gulp of soup when something on the soft skin between his thumb and his index finger moved. He opened his eyes to see worms crawling from the edge of the can and onto his hands. Walker screamed and dropped the can. The worms spilled forth and spread across the floor like a creeping cancer. The white worms strained upward with their eyeless heads as if searching. Then, in one motion, they all turned toward Walker Bart. Frightened beyond all reason, he stumbled backwards as the acid in his stomach redoubled its efforts. Unable to fight the pressure building inside, he planted his feet and spewed a tremendous amount of vomit onto the floor, which pushed the worms back from his feet. He retched and heaved until all that was left was bile. Disgusted, he watched the worms twisting back and forth in the bloody pool of his stomach contents. He turned to run, but slipped on the slick floor and fell with a splat. Crying in pain, Walker Bart pulled himself up the aisle on his elbows, desperate to flee from the worms. As he came to the end of the aisle, he crawled to a potato chip display, where a heavy wheel ran over his fingers. One of his knuckles fractured with a crunching sound of dried twigs. A thin woman atop an electric cart continued on her way without even a backward glance. Walker clutched his fingers to his flabby chest. Intense pain coursed through the crushed digits with every beat of his enlarged heart. "Come back here, you whore! I'll sue your ass for everything you've got! I'm gonna—" Suddenly, Walker's throat clogged. He retched again when, to his horror, a knot of worms fell from his lips. He began to feel them moving inside his body. The squirming little beasts had invaded the temple he had neglected all of his life. He clawed at his chest as the agony became unbearable. He heaved again, only to spew more worms across the dirty, shop-smart floor. He began to crawl again when a pair of work boots appeared in front of his face. He stopped and rolled over. Bub stared down at him in contempt. It never ceases to amaze me how your type always goes for the food instead of the medicine. I'll be taking my can opener now. Thanks for listening to Saligia. For more information, please follow me on Instagram at Adam Perry Writing or check out the website at adamperrywriting.com.